the existing barriers to CEO Donald Trump Card's boundary side are not restricted to the four-persons walls of convention. As areas are purified to begin house new sections, several landowners, consisting a moth nature reserve, include sued to halt the building. Mariana Trevino Wizard sits on a seat close a woody chapter of the Domestic Moth Center and begins identification animals. Scissortail flycatchers, verdant jays, olive tree sparrows and mud-colored thrushes grab by, pecking at oranges set out as a appetizer and splashing in a bubbly water fountain. Of the wood branch over, large-tailed grackles squeal and whistling lovebird car alarm. Nearer to the land, a zoo of butterflies flutter amongst the neighboring bloom bushes. Zebra crossing heliconians and big orange sulfurs, queens and scarlet border scarlet fay. Later down there are some sights and sounds at the center. The hum of a U.S. Division of Motherland Safety chopper top elevated. Boundary patrolling agents hum by on motorcycles and ATVs, their many faces shaded by masks and glasses, pistols at their party. The hum of trucks pulling used tires over them, anti-aliasing dust roads so the footprints of interlopers can more than readily be spotty. By the government motorboat, in threatening .30 caliber car guns on its sun deck, stormy downward the inland. The Moth Center, of that wizard is the CEO, sits on 110 acres close the southern tip of Texas, an region of cheap-lying marshes, paintbrush and scrape forest, offer a kind of ecosystems how ensure vast aerial for migrating kind of all shapes and sizes. It is as well break out on the Rio Grande inland, that forms more than rather than 1,260 miles, 27 kilometers, of the 2,000 mi boundary among the joint state and Mexico. How puts the little, individual ecological retain in the center of a violent discussion above migration and domestic safety, and if and wherever to construct Donald Trump Card's frequently promised boundary side. It is a war area, Wizard says. House which by the government wants it to seem to be. It's all theater. So they've got to include all the actors, all the costumes, and all the requisite. Southward Texas is a chimney of all kinds for animals how winter in Mexico and break in the northern climes as the weather warms. It's as well the nearest spot in the U.S. territorially to Center America, wherever a increasing quantity of families include been escaping poverty reduction and policy abuse to search shelter on U.S. ground. Close wherever Wizard was poultry spotting, a wide dam crowned by a gridway bisects the Moth Center. The is wherever the U.S. by the government wants to construct a new chapter of side, with its wide powers to seize individual characteristic for social utilize. Wizard points out how the boundary patrolling has already constructed a large valve on the way, done of the identical type of corrosion-colored steel it uses in another place in its curbstone swordsmanship. For now the pattern, incoherent to any some impeding, is more than symbolical rather than helpful. How may come changing? Wizard stares towards, as yet else boundary patrolling lorry rollers by. Its occupants, in verdant uniforms, smiling and wavelength courteously. They're just making how since they aware you're in the print, she explains. Her relation in the by the government staff how include rotated her slight piece of Texas in a nearly militarized area is normally less than rather than amiable, she says. She explains how, on a summer's day in 2017, she found 5 individual contractors in chainsaws and hard machinery cleaning paintbrush and trees on a way how rest the me and a part of the dam to the banks of the Rio Grande. They leftward following a short confronting, but a few weeks after a by the government member arriving undeclared at her office space. He came in posters of the boundary side style and said me they were house the side on our characteristic, Wizard says. The plans laid down out an 18-leg vertically plate of specific on the front line end of the dam. An 18-leg high steel curbstone fencing rises of down there, in concomitant 22-leg tall all-night blitz light, as she telephone call it. The present couple laneway expands to the breadth of 6 lanes. Or while the contractor's back, she says the man added, they would include a verdant uniform boundary patrolling present. So gunman fed agents on individual characteristic defending to profit contractors. Wizard trouble on the effect the plan boundary side would include on the kind in her nature reserve. Several bird and butterflies would be capable to undergo via or above the steel slates, but not all. An earth-living nature, love armadillos and vanishing snakes and lizards, will be captured over the side while the Rio Grande floods. In supplement, nature aerial for all the different animals would be purified as portion of the side's coercion area. Following her meet in the by the government broker, Wizard began a much-year episode of trial battles to unite the U.S. by the government of House its side on the center's individual characteristic. It has done her a character to environmentalists and migration activists, and the goal of indecency-laden blue vitriol of several Trump card supporters and side adopters. Added to the center's souvenir store gallery of bug-related knickknacks and books are displays accounting the continuing legislative fight and I Mariposa moth t-shirts, captioned, "Fight for the Borderlands." More than rather than $100,000 has been grown for the center's legislative charges. We're suing above the infringement of the NEPA Domestic Ecological Politics Instrument and the Vanishing Kind Act and the in fact withdrawal of our individual characteristic, as repeated some blatant acts by boundary patrolling, Wizard says. The center registered intention to sue documents. Later the factual litigation. Later anything. No answer of the Fed by the government, and no trial listening for more than rather than a year. Eventually, recent monthly, as contractors excited hard building machinery on the characteristic, the center registered a interim deterrent procedure. The machinery was remote, but on February 14, a Fed magistrate in Washington sacked the litigation. The washing listing of ecological and culture conservation laws how the center's lawyers say the side would infringe had all been correctly waived by the Division of Motherland Safety, the magistrate wrote. Some probable violations could not be litigated before following the by the government crushed land on the side. Wizard and her legislative crew include appealed time they expect for the by the government to do its following go. In February, convention assigned $1 for new side building. Lawmakers specified, yet, how no of the cash could be utilized for new swordsmanship via the Moth Center, Living Nature Canned, a Roman Catholic chapel and several some individual properties how include obtained popularity for opposed the building. Those restrictions do not use to the cash the Trump Card Authority has released up via the CEO's latter disaster proclamation, yet, motive fears how the Moth Center's deferment may just be interim. Tim Beacon, one of the center's lawyers, says they'll be prepared if the builders back. He contends Motherland Safety Secretariat Kirstjen Nielsen didn't correctly consult in landowners upwaiving the Fed laws and regulation how usually used to such a big building projects. Which we wish them to do is perform in those laws, go more than intentionally and enable them to believe on ways to defend the center's characteristic interests, Beacon says. It's a engineering reason, but if it planned it would buy the center several period. Wizard says how in her 6 year at the Moth Center, she's just individually observed 3 little groups of not documentary migrants upcoming via the characteristic. U.S. by the government numbers, yet, specify how the reduce Rio Grande Vale is proper and more famous accession spot for the center us families and without accompaniment families searching refuge in the U.S. Of October to February, the boundary patrolling detained 58,032 families on U.S. ground, a 209% growth above the identical period time a year over. Though Donald Trump card has been touting aside as a way of enabling boundary safety with the previous days of his president campaigning, the peak in unauthorized crossings has taken into account his urge a new feeling of urgent, one supported by Republican political community and their supporters. I completely believe the boundary side is required, says Josim Hernandez, an entrepreneur in neighboring McAllen, Texas and CEO of the region's Youthful Republicans. It is required in several areas to assist monitoring the stream of traffic and help boundary patrolling agents and their job of apprehending illicit migrant. He warns how if the side goes up in largest of the Rio Grande Vale but not in places love the Moth Center, those vulnerable areas will be the privileged illicit accession point, in the enlarged traffic guideline to precisely the type of large ecological harm the center's defenders hope to escape. How may end up creature the instance, but down there is one little difficulty. A side, the one on the long of Rio Grande in southern Texas, won't resolve the present migration issue. Our side is often a mi or more than off of the inland, the actual boundary, says Jim Favorite, mayoress of McAllen. Construct it any nearer, and it would be in the inland's flooding simple. As quickly as migrants crucifix the inland, he continues, they're acceptable to include their policy refuge claims heard by a U.S. magistrate. In some components of the U.S., such as California, though by the government is house walls order on the boundary, compliance would be migrant of installation leg on U.S. ground. In the Rio Grande, yet, the crossings won't end before U.S. refuge law changes, and those who are escaping their homes in Central America aware how the law has modified, and receive onto dry earth would not be quite. The present framework has induced more than would-be migrants to manage off of places like Tijuana, on the California boundary, and chief in the direction Texas, although the adjacent Mexico country of Tamaulipas struggles to transactions in abuse and the impact of narcotic cartels. This politics order now is, allows hold knocking for the side and disregard the large issue we're creation in refuge and the fail of migration politics, says Favorite. The Planet Birding Center in Hidalgo, Texas, giving a view of which could be in keep for the Moth Center, fair a half a dozen miles up the inland. The wood-dotted perspectives yet draw living nature watchers, in binocular about their necks and pet identification charts in brush. A channel links the Rio Grande to an old pump house, that one day given water supply to the agriculture fields to the polar. The pump house utilized to be a character of the area's connect to, and dependency on, the water of the Rio Grande. Currently, the inland is just available via a tightway at the far end of the channel. The otherwise of the characteristic is on the lining in the type of rising boundary side Mr. Trump card promises to expand. The inland dam is a continuous vertically specific mound. A rusted red curbstone fencing looms above areas wherever the specific isn't as top. Circuit link fencing and bent concertina cable in shaver sharp spines fill in wherever down there's not steel. A large electric valve close the pump house looks love thing out of Jura Garden, appropriate for keeping behind an irate tyrannosaur. Cameras dot the fencing link, and at the some late, wherever the way curves downward to the inland, a portable boundary patrolling watchtower in black, toned windows surveils the region. The side is a visitor gravity of kinds, figure several who may include go for a poultry watching walk or a trip to the Pump House Museum. Teresa Roos, an Iowan who spends winters in fragrant southern Texas in her man, pauses at the formidable valve and says she approves of the side. I loathe to say it, but I believe we requirement it, she says. Addition, how migrant upcoming through the inland could give diseases in the U.S. Yet I sense for the guys, she continues. Further downward the Gritway, a youthful pair, Ithiel Cruz and Karen Tovar, of neighboring Texas towns, as well equal interestingly at the specific, steel and prickly cable. They say they include no view on if it's nice or poor, but they don't love all the adverse focus the discussion above boundary safety is giver their area. We were fair in Houston newly, and they listen we're of the Vale, and their love, dang, how is it downward down there? You folks see a lot of criminality or a lot of human beings upcoming above. Cruz says. It's love frankly we don't very listen lot on it. It's very nice wherever we're at. We don't aware why year all are frightened. Statistic carry the of. Neighboring McAllen, for copy, has the minimum criminality bet in 34 year, in declines every of the history 9 year. Human beings can do arrests, human beings can retain, human beings can halt, Rodriguez says. Fences and walls don't do how. Which's precise to him, yet, is how McAllen and the towns about it are not in a country of meltdown. Time they've seen a splash in not documentary migrants, placement several tension on town asset, the refuge repatriates don't remain in the region. They chief to the polar and east, wherever the jobs, and their friends and household, dwell. Their departure to Chicago, they go to New York or the big cities, he says. They will be the ones to speak you if the is a meltdown or no. It's a foggy night in medium March, and fare a few bends downward the Rio Grande of the Moth Center. Sandra Leal and her son Edgar sit on the banks of the inland and minnow. An Saljuis garden is arranged at the spot wherever current boundary side turns in plan side. It's a piece bit of verdant herb, trees, outing tables, barbecue grills and ship docks. The overnight up, more than rather than 300 migrants cross the inland fare southward of the garden, wherever they were rapidly undertaken in guardianship by boundary patrolling. Currently, yet, it's peaceful. Down there's a garden on the Mexico party as so, fare 100 meters off. Human beings are fishery down there, too much, and a few weak chords of ranchero piece of music can be heard while the breeze beating east. Leal says she enjoys conducting period in her son by the inland. Over in the date, she showed Edgar a map of the Rio Grande and explainable how it stretches all the way of remote Colorado. He wondered if several of the water supply they were fishery in passing the entire range. She told she favorite to believe so, how the inland, the four longest in the U.S., forms a ties how rest profound in the cardiac of the nation. Though if we don't capture a item at all present, it's more than on creature associated to our nature beautiful out there, she says. Game inwardly is pleasant, she says, but the outside memories, departure fishery, newcomer the Moth Center, departure to thing nature, are the ones how recent. She trouble how a side will cut her society off of the inland, and offer her son a various type of infancy ram. Take the guys out fishery, vision the outdoor earth, creature capable to show him Mexico order down there possessing a side fair conducted off of our nature beautiful, she says. I don't wish a ram to be relying off the big side dividing us. How's a anxiety cinematographer Ben Masters says he's seen act out all on the US-Mexico boundary. He and a team of friends passing on the Rio Grande of El Paso to the Bay of Mexico on canoeing, on horseback and mount bicycle, record their travel for the newly liberated document The Inland and the Side. Which I include seen in areas wherever down there is a side, human beings don't sense convenient, Masters says. Down there's a no person's earth among the inland and the side wherever they're always troubled by boundary patrolling. You aware it's not an environmental wherever human beings wish to holiday. Masters as well notes the mockery how the U.S. fought a war in Mexico in the 1840s in big portion to provide accessing to the Rio Grande, the just main flesh of water supply in the area. Now the nation is substantially giver how earth off. By law the U.S. by the government can't use the side to unit Americans off of their individual characteristic. If it's ranchers, homeowners, churchgoers, or poultry watchers, the boundary patrolling is obligated to build gates on the long of the boundary side to enable U.S. residents to go as they happy. The Moth Center's wizard promises to offer her valve accessing coding to each one of the 30,000 yearly visitors and members of the retain. The fact, yet, is how the side, in its formidable steel, specific and shaver cable, by the vigilant eye of uniformed by the government agents, could shape a mental obstacle as lot as it is a natural a. How's the spot wizard, in her litigation, is hard to do, how the side creates more than problems rather than it solves. By the government, she says, as necessary to get the human beings, and the animals, who dwell on the Rio Grande in complete expense. We cherish the inland, wizard says. We aware which an unbelievable source it is both of for our nature treasures, but as well for our trade, for our economics, for the amistad, the kindred, how we include on the some party. The issue is if a magistrate will ultimately accept.